So I'm going to talk about debugging applications in Visual Basic. For a lot of you, you've already had some exposure to this, but for some of you, you might want a more explicit introduction to this. It is very useful, so hopefully this will help. In terms of debugging, the main thing we're going to be talking about is using break mode. So there are 4 different ways to enter break mode. One is you can force an unhandled exception to be thrown, or alternatively, you'll end up in break mode if you have an unhandled exception to be thrown, whether you expect it or not. You can set a breakpoint and run the application. You can choose debug or step into command or press F11, or you can use Control-Alt-Break. This is really, as far as I know, the whole reason keyboards have a break button. So now you finally know the answer to that age-old question. Typically, we're using the unhandled exceptions and the breakpoints, and just clicking to set it up in Visual Studio is quite simple. So that's my preferred method. You can disable or re-enable or delete breakpoints very easily. Let's have a look at that. So in Visual Studio, this is a slightly broken copy of Lab 1. So when I run it, I'm getting this. I've tried to set a default value in this combo box, which by the way is a very good idea, and I haven't done that successfully. So if I leave the combo box blank and I run a calculation, I get an unhandled exception. Now I'm in break mode. This is one of the ways you can get into break mode. If I'd rather set a breakpoint, and that is what I wanted to discuss here, I would go down to a place where I want to put a breakpoint, and I'd click in the margin. Here I'm noticing, for example, that this line doesn't seem to be run. So here I'm trying to set the combo box's selected index to 0, and that doesn't seem to be happening. I know it's populating, but that's not happening, and I need to find out why. So I can set a breakpoint on this line, and that will mean the program will stop running when it gets to that line and tell me the state of things. It may never get to that line, so perhaps that breakpoint is not that useful. I could also do it in this for loop. I do know that that combo box is being populated, but that the selected index isn't running. So that should give me some good information. So that's just, again, by clicking in this gray margin bar. I can unset a breakpoint by just clicking on the red dot again. There's also options here under debug to delete all breakpoints, disable all breakpoints, which doesn't delete them, but temporarily disables them. So that's very helpful. And if I've disabled them, they turn kind of hollow and they don't actually do anything. And it also gives me the option to re-enable it later. So disabling and re-enabling can be very handy. So now, with a breakpoint in this for loop on this particular statement, I can hit start, and we'll see that the program is broken. So right now it's stopped completely, and it's running the for loop. It's running right now, it just hasn't loaded the form, because right now we're on the onload event handler. You'll see at the bottom I've got a couple different windows. So there's one called locals. Locals includes everything within the current scope. Autos only includes things related to the statement, or it attempts to. It's kind of based on the surrounding statements. You'll notice here that the row count is set to 0. Here the row count is set to 0. And as I hit continue up here, it's going to run the for loop again. And then I'll see, oh, the row count has incremented to 1, incremented to 2, etc. The row count's incrementing each time I go through the for loop. Each time that breakpoint is coming, I have to click continue. It's going to 13, it's gone to 14, and now the form has loaded. The program's still running in the background. If that part of the program were ever called again, it would break at that point again. It just happens that it won't because it's in an onload event handler. If you didn't notice the problem, what you'll notice here is that the conversion array.length is set to 42. I only have 14 rows in my array. So the problem is that it's checking the length, including the number of rows and columns in the array used in Lab 1, instead of just one dimension. I can also see it even by just anything you hover over, it'll prepare a little window that shows you the value of things at that particular point. Right now, for example, the value of row count is 0. As I iterate, I can see it right here. Row count 1, row count 2. Conversion array, its length is 42. So that tells me what the problem is here. If I were to change my conversion array.length to say get upper bound of the index 0, I would expect this to work properly. It should work about the same way. Row count is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, incrementing properly. Conversion array's length is still 42. this time the statement after that row count is happening properly, so the selected index is being set. And I did speak to a number of people who had this particular problem. So as we saw, the locals window displayed variables in the current scope. The autos window works like the locals window, but only displays information about variables used by the current statement and the previous statement. There's also what's called the immediate window. This actually lets you display and assign values during the execution. Set a breakpoint, we start the program, and we show the immediate window. This allows me to, for example, change the value of row count, which is a really bad idea, but I could. If I do row count equals 3, hit enter, that does in fact change the value of row count to 3. That does mean that as this continues, it's going to be skipping a few values. Oh, I just completely broke the program. But it is neat to be able to assign values to a specific array or value. Maybe I'll try again and do something a little more constructive. Say conversion array 1, 1. Now as we run the program, we'll see that it iterates properly. It's going to go through this 14 times as I keep hitting continue. I see the value of the row changing at the bottom. By the way, this me here is referring to the whole class basically. And it shows me the values of just everything here. It's very detailed. There's a lot of information you can get to if you expand this me. You'll see similar options to expand other things in these options. For example, properties related to the conversion array. Even right now, I can see that the array value at index 1, 1 is Kyle. So we'll have a nice conversion of kilometers to Kyle. Okay.